few weeks ago, I challenged myself to make a game prototype a day, and I did for 12 days. This was a really interesting challenge during which I had a lot of fun and I learned a few things. In this video, I walk you through all of them and tell you what I learned along the way. I also have a cool announcement at the end of the video, so stay tuned. Let's get started. I started this challenge because I was feeling in kind of a creative block. I was not really happy with my situation. I wanted to work on a game, but I felt like I had no idea or that they were never good enough. I know that creativity and inspiration can come by doing stuff, so I decided to start with something and see how it goes. I didn't tell anyone I was going to do it, and I didn't set any particular goals. My first idea was Hoplaser. I don't exactly remember how I came up with the idea, but I thought that I wanted to make a laser feel powerful, and with something powerful comes recoil. Of course, lasers don't work that way, but I don't care. So each time you press the mouse, the laser fires and you start to rotate. The rotation will toggle between left and right, so you know what to expect and thus try to control the movements. I quickly added some enemies that will simply go towards you and die when hit by the laser. I spent a bit of time on the laser to make it look cool, so I added particles, some glow, and of course screen shake. I think it looks pretty nice in the end. It's nothing more than a prototype, there's no goal, the enemies are pre-spawned so that there won't be new one when they're all dead, and they won't even kill you if they touch you. You'll see that throughout the video. I had to make shortcuts to have something interesting to show each day. That will be the first thing I learned. Fake it until you make it. If your goal is to demonstrate how an idea would work, I see no problem in recording only what's working or playing the game in such a way that the viewer believes the game works. The goal here is not to lie, but to show off an idea in the best way possible in the shortest amount of time. You don't want to work 6 months on a prototype just to show off your mechanic idea. I spent about an hour and a half making this. On the second day, I wanted to make some kind of one-button hyper-casual mobile game. I thought about gymnasts when they do giant spins around the bars and how it would make a fun game. So basically, you play as a little spinny boy, definitely not Thor's hammer, and you must click to release at the right time. If you're close enough to a bar, you'll automatically attach and start spinning in a random direction. To make it better looking, I added some glow, a trail, and a following camera. I could totally see this game being turned into a mobile game. With some cool graphics, it would be very cool to play. I didn't bother to make the connection to the bar correct, so the hammer will not start its rotation at the right angle and in the right direction, but this could easily be fixed with some math. Same as before, the world is not generated procedurally, so this would need to be fixed to turn it into a game. It would be nice to also have a scoring system based on how high you went. I did this prototype in an hour and 45 minutes. For the third day, I literally had a vision the day before making this game. I was in my bed and I thought, oh shit, I have an idea. What if I made Pong, but you only spawn paddles when you dash, and then you could push the paddles. So in the morning, I already knew what I had to do. I initially made all the objects kinematic bodies. That way, I could calculate the motion and I could make sure nothing would go out of control. I did that because I was a bit afraid using Godot's physics would be too unstable. After some fiddling, I decided to turn the ball and the paddles into rigid bodies, and the result was much better. The behavior was much more natural and fun. So basically, each time a player collides with the ball or the paddle, I apply an impulse to the rigid body based on the collision normal. This is super simple to implement and it makes for some really interesting behavior. I added some simple screen shake, particles, and text to make the prototype more interesting visually. At this point, I really fell in love with the idea. Even though it's a 2-player game, I was already having a blast launching my paddles at full speed on the ball. Because I lost time using kinematic bodies at the beginning, I spent around 5 hours and 15 minutes on this prototype. This one made me realize that showing ideas is hard. Sometimes people won't really understand why or how your idea is super cool. But don't give up. Try to show it with a different angle or just show it at another time of the day. Fourth day, fourth prototype. I couldn't find a name for it, so it stays unnamed. I wanted to make something that had a similar mechanic to a small indie game I played recently called Self. Basically, you start a dash during which you can steer wherever you want. At the end of the dash, you'll jump, and then you can only control yourself left to right while falling. You need to grab an energy orb to refill and start a new dash. It's a pretty simple concept, but I was not entirely sold on the controls. I tried to tweak it for a while and it didn't came exactly how I imagined it. Again, simple particles and camera shake to make it a bit more interesting. At this point, I feel I'm losing a bit of motivation. I started the challenge great with the first 3 prototypes. The third one was especially great for me, and this one feels like a downgrade. We'll see how it goes. I spent 3 hours on this one. 5th day, it's actually Saturday because I started on Tuesday. It's the weekend and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this project. I feel a bit lazy and not really inspired. While browsing Reddit the night before, I came across a cool Reflex game where you have to catch falling rod before they hit the ground. I thought this could totally be turned into a game, but making a Reflex game in 2D or even in 3D is boring. What could make it 10 times better? Yes, VR! Fortunately, I own a Quest 2 and I already did some VR development for me and a client, so I know I can pull it off pretty quickly. To speed up the development, I used the amazing Godot Oculus Quest Toolkit add-on made by NeoSpark314. Shout out to him for his work. Link in the description if you're interested. The setup is pretty easy. Each rod is a special rigid body that can be grabbed thanks to the add-on I just mentioned. The rods are attached with a 6-dot joint. I start a timer and then each rod will fall one after the other at random. To make them fall, I simply detach them from the joint. So yeah, Godot can do 3D and even VR. In the end, it's simple enough but works quite well for VR. It would be simple to add a score system and add some variations to make the challenge harder and harder. The only downside is that the Quest doesn't have a very huge FOV, and so rods can't be too far apart, otherwise you can't see them all at once even with your peripheral vision. I did this one in 3 hours and 15 minutes, which is pretty fast for VR development in my opinion. Okay, this is a lot of information I'm throwing at you, so let's take a pause. It's now Sunday. I decided that Sundays would be off because I'm not a robot. The weather was not super great, so I jumped on this occasion to do some playtest of Dashpong with my girlfriend. It went super well and the game was 10 times better when played together. Later in the day, we managed to squeeze a short hike between the rain. With that, I was feeling refreshed and ready for a new week of prototypes. Be consistent with your work, but allow yourself some rest. After the first week, I could see it was becoming harder to produce something every day. Even though I was usually not spending more than 4 to 5 hours a day, having at least one day where you don't work on your ideas is good. Monday, 6th day of the challenge. I have the bad habit of procrastinating a lot on Mondays. It's something hard for me to start the week. Again, I was not really sure of what I wanted to prototype. I had some ideas, but I worry they'll be too long or too complex to implement. So, what do I do when feeling uninspired? Make a reflex-based game. This is Statera, a game where you must balance the upside-down triangle using 2 keys. I think this one is not really interesting, so I won't say much about it. It's just a rigid body connected to a joint. You apply an impulse each time you press a key. If the triangle touches the ground, you lose and gets ejected. Even if it was quite simple, I still spent 2 hours on it. Time is weird, right? At this point, I understood that you have to put the work out there. Having ideas is cool, but if you don't test your ideas against real people, it's worthless. So try to make something and show it as soon as possible. Don't wait for it to be perfect or whatever. For the 7th prototype, I wanted to make something around the famous game Snaaake. I wanted something that would feel good to control, so I made Snaaake. You steer around, and to capture food you must encircle it. When you press a button, you start laying down your body, and if you go back to your tail, you eat the fruit. This was interesting to make because I had to find a way to know if a fruit was inside the body or not. To explain quickly, when you press the button, I add points to a line 2D where your head goes. I use these points to draw the tail, but also to create a collision polygon. I can then check if there's something inside the collision polygon. Clearly, this is not the most optimal way, and it can cause some lag if the shape is really complex, but I made this in 2 hours and 30 minutes, so no time for optimization here. As usual, sprinkle some camera shake, add some particles and some camera movement, and you have a nice little prototype. For the 8th day, I made something that I wanted to try for a long time. The idea is simple. You have a free-falling rocket and you must land it. To control it, you have 2 lateral thrusters for torque control and 1 big bottom one for speed. The goal is to land on the C platform, but you have to be careful. The platform moves and you must land slowly, otherwise you'll explode. You can clearly see the inspiration for this one, so Elon, if you came across this video, please send some Dogecoin. The idea is simple, but I spent some time tweaking the different parameters: impulse forces, initial velocity of the rigid body, its mass, etc. I wanted something that felt good to handle, but that was also a bit challenging. I also spent some time on the visuals, just to make something not horrible to look at. The usual screen shake plus particles and glow did wonders for that. At that point, I learned that spending just a bit of time adding some polish, even for a prototype, was important. Your idea will be received so much better if you take just a few minutes to add some particles, screen check, or a color palette. Even if you'll probably ditch that in the future, it will make your prototype stand out. I spent about 4 hours and 15 minutes on this one. The 9th prototype is about spinning huge mace around by moving your character, so of course I had to call it Spinit. You can spawn more maces and you can release and catch them at all time. With that, you must defeat enemies that will come towards you or shoot at you. To defeat the enemies, you have to hit them hard enough. The maces are attached to the player with a physics joint, so you have to run around in circle to build momentum. It's actually pretty fun and very hectic. I tried making a real chain by adding more joints together. Visually, it was more interesting than a straight line, but it was much more harder to control the maces and to make them spin. So I stuck with the single joint method. I used a spring joint, that way the link will grow longer when you build momentum. This adds some challenge because you must take that into account when building speed to kill enemies. And to make it better looking, I added what? You start to get the idea now. Particles and screen shake. Yay! I actually made the screen shake force depend on the impact force of your mace. Not that you'll ever notice, but it's there. 10th prototype already, we're dangerously approaching the end. That's a shame because since the 7th prototype, I started to have more and more ideas. My brain was really getting used to coming up with weird stuff to try out. But I guess that everything must end, right? At this point, I already decided that I wanted to stop the challenge. I thought I would do 2 more to have a total of 12 prototypes. Creativity and inspiration can be forced. What I mean by that is by showing up every day and trying to produce something, no matter how small it is, you'll start to get the hang of it. Ideas will probably start to flow. Anyway, for this one, I wanted to do something in 3D. Since the beginning, I did a lot of stuff in 2D. As I feel more confident, I'll be able to create something quickly. So let me present to you Rebounce, a game where you must dash towards enemy to kill them. This will give you some rebounce force and will slow down time, allowing you to find your next target and continue. I added the ability to bounce off of obstacles too, and it made the whole thing much more interesting, especially since you have to dodge the bullets. I could totally see this mechanic be used in a real game. It feels good and powerful to dash towards enemies and get them one by one. Imagine a game where you have a lot of enemies coming at you, you must dodge their attacks and kill them. You could have giant enemies with weak points only accessible by dashing on them to gain height. This is a cool idea in my opinion. All of that took me about 4 hours and 45 minutes to make. To add some cool effects, I spent some time adding screen shake, some particles, a bullet time, and a spatial shader that will show everything in grayscale except for the enemies when you are in the zone. For the 11th prototype, I wanted to explore an idea for a mobile game. I know I wanted to make something very simple to control, like a one-button game, and with the idea that the player will follow a line. I initially made something where the player was automatically following a path, and you could only control the direction, so you'd have to avoid obstacles and stuff that way. While that worked, I had the idea to actually build the path while the player was moving. That's how I created Ride. The player will automatically start moving, and you have to add points to the path by clicking where you want. It might look easy, but don't worry. The player will go faster and faster, and along the way, you not only have to avoid walls, but also moving obstacles. It's actually harder than it looks. I could totally see this be turned into a mobile game, for example. To change a bit from my usual dark colors, I went to lowspec.com and took a 3-color palette. I added some particles and screen check for when you hit an obstacle, and that was it. Ride was made in 4 hours and 45 minutes. minutes. Something important I learned during this challenge is that you shouldn't judge your ideas too quickly. I know that I do it a lot personally. I think about something and I find X or Y reasons that it won't work, or why the idea is garbage. You never know how exactly it will come out, so try it. In reality, your idea will probably evolve as you prototype, because it's impossible to think about everything in advance. You might be surprised about how certain things might turn out. For the final prototype of this challenge, I wanted to make something with the flocking algorithm. If you don't know what it is, it's a simple 3 rules algorithm that can be used to simulate what big group of birds would look like. Actually, someone pointed out to me during my challenge that something I did was similar to the Boids or flocking algorithm. Also, in the meantime, I stumbled upon this tweet. The game looks absolutely stunning, everything about it is really well executed, and if you pay close attention, the enemies have some sort of flocking behavior. That was enough to sell me on the idea of implementing such algorithm. So I looked online, found the 3 rules, some explanations, and started working on it. The flocking algorithm works by giving each bird 3 rules: alignment, cohesion, and separation. By following these 3 rules, we'll see emerge a group behavior, even though there's no leader. If you find this interesting, I greatly advise you to look into group intelligence, cellular automata, and basic AI. This shit is real good. So, the first rule will make each bird align itself to the mean angle of its neighbors. This is to ensure they'll go roughly in the same direction. The second rule, cohesion, will make each bird steer towards the average position of its neighbors. This makes sure they stay in a group. And finally, the third rule, separation, ensures each bird will try to keep its distance from its neighbors by steering away from the average distance between him and them. This is cool, but I wanted to be able to control them, so I added a 4th rule that would make them steer toward my mouse. If you want to make such a steering behavior, Kids Can Code made a super cool tutorial on steering missiles, and it looks awesome. With that, I nearly have everything I wanted. The final touch to make it interesting was to add another action that would tell all the birds to steer towards a point. For that, I simply check when the user right clicks and I launch all the birds towards a point at much greater speed. When they collide, I kill them and spawn some blood particles. Don't worry, no real birds were harmed during this prototype, and all of that took me roughly 3 hours and 45 minutes to make. And that's a wrap, guys. I just showed you the 12 prototypes I made in 12 days. This was surely a great experience where I learned a ton of things and I had a ton of fun. What I didn't show you is that I tried some ideas but abandoned them because they were too hard to implement or I didn't know where I was going. My last take would be that making short prototypes in a few hours is cool, but sometimes an idea requires more time. If you think your idea is worth it, give yourself some time. I ditched some ideas because I couldn't make them fast enough, and I feel like some of them could have been really good. As you may have understood during this video, I really enjoyed creating Dashpong, and I decided to start working on it. This was exactly the kind of idea I needed to make my first commercial game. So I already started working on it, and I'm currently creating the Steam page, so you'll be able to wishlist this bad boy like crazy. I'm also preparing the first devlog about it, so if you want to learn more, click like and subscribe to not miss it, and join the Discord if you want. In the meantime, have a great day, and I see you later. Bye!